So I know we've had like politics and serious topics and things like that in entertainment for a long time. It's nothing new and it's not inherently a bad thing. But as we all know, there are two particular groups of IPs, and ultimately Disney, that it seems like that's just their bread and butter and they just won't stop. Even like it's mainly based off feminism and being woke, which is weird. I must be getting too old for my own good because at least a handful of years ago, woke was more like a conspiracy theory term. Now it has something to do with feminism or anything gender and sex based. I don't know. But I don't innately have a disdain for politics or something to talk about, whether it's race based. We've had a lot of moments in fiction as well as real life, but mainly fiction that has addressed racism. I don't have an issue with that for obvious reasons. Sexism, don't have an issue with that. I don't have an issue with anything political, especially that is apparently widespread in our modern society, being addressed through entertainment. I don't have a problem with that. The issue is when a certain piece of media is supposed to be just for fun and they do a whole lot more than sprinkle it in. It just takes over the whole thing. That's where it becomes a problem. So at this point, I'm really starting to wonder, do we really need politics and entertainment? Because it's becoming too much to bear at this point. The media in general has sucked a lot lately, primarily with the superhero genre and primarily between the two big groups of IPs that have really been screwed up lately, Star Wars and Marvel. I'll even throw DC in there, but that's not even due to politics. That's due to just the quality of the movies and things that they were putting out when the DCEU was still active. That was a whole different thing. But as far as the actual like feminism and a bunch of other stuff, mainly feminism, they barely have been touching anything else. So it's really feminism. Yeah, between Star Wars and Marvel, it just has not been good. And even when you take the wokeness out of it, superhero stuff has just not been good all around. Like the Task Force X game that came out that was very buggy. A whole lot of people said that it seemed like it was an unfinished game that they just threw to market and they didn't care to do the job right. That whole thing to the movies and TV shows under Star Wars and Marvel that have been following just what seems like an overall feminism wave. Stars, writers, directors, when these movies and shows fail, will attack the audience. They even attack the audience through the content itself, saying that this failed because primarily men are sexist, misogynistic, and whatnot. But there are plenty of women sounding off saying that this stuff sucks because you're incorporating too much feminist stuff into it, right? So you don't even need to listen to us guys. Other women are telling y'all this stuff is not good because it's taking away from what the content is supposed to be. And again, if we're focusing on Marvel, I'm a firm believer that the first three phases of Marvel, more or less everything that happened in the first three phases of Marvel and of the MCU, were good. I know some people are going to disagree with that. I know there are some movies that a lot of people are like were just flat out terrible or whatever. Like I didn't realize Age of Ultron has such a bad rap. I'm gonna be honest. I did not grow up on comic books like that, none crazy manga. I'm honestly kind of just catching up to that. I'm very behind the game. So in terms of the very foundation of, again, say Age of Ultron for Ultron, the way that Ultron was conceived in the live action is drastically different than it happened in the comic books. Tony had nothing to do, at least originally, and because I know comic book characters' origin stories change, but I don't think there was ever a comic book origin story where Tony Stark created Ultron. It was always Hank Pym. Just off of that inception change alone, I guess threw a whole lot of stuff out of whack, and that's one particular reason a lot of people don't like Age of Ultron. I still hold the unpopular opinion that Age of Ultron was not trash. It was good. Was it great? Especially when I started looking at other information related to Ultron's origins and part of the reasons that people don't like it. It started to make sense, and I could see that. But taking it just for what it is as a movie, maybe certain things didn't make sense to people. Plot holes, I don't keep up with plot holes. It's too much to keep up with, especially in a universe like the MCU. It's just too much to keep up with. I'm not gonna be like this was established in phase one or phase two or phase three, and now we're in phase 4 and 5, and this contradicts that. And where the case, I don't have the capacity to do that. I just like to see what it is. Does the story within the movie itself look good and make sense? And do I enjoy what I'm seeing? If the answer is yes, I'm gonna be like, it was a good movie. If it's not for those same reasons, then that's when I'm be like, yeah, it didn't make sense. This execution wasn't good. Whatever. I do believe that phases 1 through 3 overall good, and of course ended on a very high note. And because of Endgame the way it ended, I would say the MCU wrapped up on such a high note that the hype for what was coming next was still even higher than Infinity War and Endgame when that saga, when the Infinity Stone saga was officially wrapped up. But pretty much everything after that has sucked. as we all know. I'm not going to deep dive into that. We all know basically everything that has come after the end of phase 3 has just been nowhere near good. And again, the core reason for it that both men and women alike are calling out is the wokeness slash feminism that has been incorporated into these IPs, which again, comic books have had political stuff introduced to them or in them for decades, well before I was born. I was born in 95. Well before I was born, and even some of these new content creators and younger people that were born in the 2000s, well before we were born, there was always politics, or very often there was politics in comic books. You know, it changed drastically, and a lot of things have gotten darker and more realistic as time has gone on. But politics has always been a part of it. Some of our favorite superheroes, primarily if you look at, say, Static Shock, including the old cartoon, that whole thing and the whole Dakotaverse is pretty much survived or revolves around race politics and things like that. It's not that that stuff gets addressed. Like, even again, if you look at the old Static Shock cartoon, obviously the foundation of it was race-based. The whole thing that led to his powers was supposed to be, at least in the cartoon and I guess in his original origin story, he got his powers because of a race riot, or game banging between different people of different races, right? But if you look at the cartoon, they even address mental health. They address racism directly with Richie's father. They address homelessness and how people do not see homeless people as human at all when he dealt with the little girl with ice powers and snow powers, right? They touching reality through entertainment is not inherently a bad thing. But what helped Static Shock was that there were moments that were just good. Like, they were just fun. It was kick butt. The Justice League collab that happened and all that other stuff. Like, there were moments where it was just classic superhero kick butt fun. And it seems like both Disney, through Star Wars and Marvel, don't know how to do that anymore. And the main thing that keeps messing it up is that they keep inserting women into, it's not even that they insert women into the lead roles. That's not even the issue. The issue is that the women and whoever else that they insert into the lead roles, even the supporting roles, the support casting roles, the writers and directors, and all these people are coming in with their own agenda to apparently make men uncomfortable and to make us cry. And they're doing it by drastically changing, in some cases, the very foundation of what a character or group of characters is supposed to be, and throwing everything off that we know about the character, in addition to it not being entertaining, because they make it a point to be political at every turn. She-Hulk is one of the most hated Marvel products that has been put out probably ever. And apparently that show, the entirety of it, all 9 episodes, was supposed to address feminism and I guess certain challenges that women face on a day-to-day basis. In this case, from the first season, and hopefully we don't get a second one if I'm being honest, but based on the first season, mainly when it comes to relating to men and dating and stuff like that, right? And I'm not even gonna dive down that rabbit hole. And as a result, the quality of the show was ruined before it really even got started. She-Hulk is a fan, well, I won't say a fan favorite, but she's liked. She's very well liked. And here's the thing. I would argue that through the comic book, She-Hulk was more familiar and well liked by men more than women before there was potential for her to become live action. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me. But men then knew who She-Hulk was, okay? For obvious reasons, because if there was a real life She-Hulk, we also knew that She-Hulk was, like, she could kick butt. We knew that She-Hulk, she was not, in the comics, she could hold her own, being a lawyer, superhero, whatever, like, she was cool. So we have no issue with her being like a leader in terms of being like a female superhero. But the way they presented She-Hulk in the live action show was beyond tragic. It was terrible. And they did it because they were trying to lead with a feminist-based agenda that in every possible turn made guys look bad and tried to make women look good, but in some cases really only made women look pretty bad in that show. It was very weird. Here's my thing. I want everyone to feel seen and heard when it comes to media. Media is a reflection of the world, or at least it's supposed to be. That's why comic books, especially the more African American or Black centric comic books, were great, because for the Black audience that were in the comics back in the day, that reflected the reality that a lot of people, including old heads, had to actually live through. But it also showed a way to, like, how could we tackle this as a group? What do people deal with, and how do they tackle it on the individual level on a day-to-day basis? All that stuff. So I don't have a problem with, TV shows, music, and other things addressing sexism for women. The fact that there are men who believe that women, when they approach them and they're abrasive, they're aggressive, they're trying to extract the grown thing, pretty much within the first 5 minutes of, introducing themselves to a woman, and the woman has an issue with that. Those guys have an issue with being rejected by women when they come off a certain type of way, and that's a reality for most women. You know, sad to say, the mass majority of women that have ever existed on the planet and still exist on this planet have ever set foot on this planet. I would argue 90+% of women that have ever existed and currently exist have experienced some form of SA. And even a good amount of women under that number have experienced full-blown rape. So, and for a while, it was even cultural. There's still parts of the world where that is normal. We've seen videos of women in the East being beat up, forced on. We've seen news of Western reporters from here in the States going to certain countries in the East and, doing reports and stuff. And they're smothered by 1,000 different men and all this stuff. And then the lights suddenly go out. And now the guys feel like they can get away with trying to force themselves on the woman and try to do other things to her and potentially unalive her. That is a reality for most women in varying levels in different parts of the world. I have no problem with women addressing that. If anything, addressing that is a good thing. I'm not going to deep dive into this, but even when you look at the gender war, I think it's ran its course. I'm sick and tired of it. But I do think there are quite a few upsides to the discussions that a lot of people were having. And one of those upsides, especially if we're focusing on us, we needed women to push back. Because the fact of the matter is, we didn't necessarily know when we were being condescending to women. We didn't necessarily know when we were operating off of misogyny towards women, thinking they didn't know anything and they weren't smart. We didn't know when we did something and it was SA, unfortunately, because it was that integrated into the culture. And the fact of the matter is, our old heads most likely weren't telling us, or like in droves, in mass, in general, were not telling us little boys what not to do and how to not touch women, how to not talk to women, all that other stuff. It still happens to this day. So I want everyone to be seen. I want everyone to be heard. I want people's grievances to be aired out and actually respected. And we as human beings adjust accordingly. However, this is still entertainment. Again, Static Shock had episodes where it addressed mental health, homelessness, the very foundation is race, neurodivergency, particularly when it came to being, I don't believe it was autistic, it was something else. Dyslexic, it was dyslexic. Stuff like that. Even the passing of a parent and that whole thing, trauma. But it did not do that every single episode. And that's where these shows are going wrong. Either they are directly attacking these topics every possible turn they can get, or they may not attack those particular topics, but they do things in a way that's kind of coming off that way. So even when we pivot from Static Shock and those other shows to, say, The Acolyte, I don't necessarily inherently have an issue with it being almost 100% women in the cast. I know a lot of people don't like that. I don't necessarily have an issue with that, because there have been shows where the casts have, and even movies, Black Panther, there have been shows and movies and other media where the characters were almost all Black. All white casts have been a thing for obvious reasons. We've had quite a few shows, and we're still building it up, but we've had quite a few shows where, entire casts are casts of mostly Latin/Hispanic folks, right? Same thing with Asian folks. We're getting to a point where this is balancing out, thankfully. I don't have an issue with, like, if we're going to switch this to a gender/sex-based thing of entire or majority casts being led with women. Again, the issue is not necessarily what the people look like, where they come from and stuff. The issue is these people who happen to be women are coming in and screwing up something, the very foundation of something that has been set and that everyone understands and that everyone loves. And then when we don't accept it, they get mad at us and say, you hate women, that's why you don't like it. I haven't seen the third episode of The Acolyte, but I've seen other content creators talk about it and complain about it, and it's pretty much across the board, even videos I haven't watched, that The Acolyte is terrible from front to back, including the third episode. And apparently in the third episode, one of the things that happens, because The Acolyte is a Star Wars based IP, apparently that in the third episode of The Acolyte, I guess the coven of witches that the two main twin girls come from, they are Force users. They're kind of like the antithesis or the opposite of the Night Sisters, because the Night Sisters are Force users. They just, I guess, do it in a way that's more magic. So I guess for this group, this coven of witches is the same thing, except I think it's fair to say they are light side users of the Force in terms of magic, whereas the Night Sisters on the dark side, I think is this coven of witches is on the light side. The problem is the Jedi understand what the Force is, the Sith understand what the Force is. The Night Sisters understand what the Force is. There are other groups of people that use the Force and other races in Star Wars that uses the Force. And it's always been synonymous understood at the core what it is. This is the first time, according from what the videos and stuff I've seen have said, that this coven of witches attempted to change the very foundational, understanding of what the Force is, how it works, and what you can do with it. And I don't, you know what? I don't even want to say what you can do with it because, again, at least for me, I didn't know the Force could be used to perform basically magic. That was new to me, relatively recently. Not like super recently, but like relatively recently. So, adding new functionalities to the Force when you reach certain levels of power, even that's not necessarily bad. Changing the foundation of what it is, that's not good. And just because that's what a lot of people are saying, I don't know if I even want to watch the third episode, especially because I didn't care for the first two. Like, dude, it's escapism. We play video games, we watch TV shows, we watch movies. We do a lot of stuff because of escapism. We want to be able to clock out and see something that just looks cool. Us guys, generally speaking, we like to see things go boom. We like to see people get punched in the face. Even in Baki, I love Baki. I think it's weird, but at times it's funny that in a martial arts based anime, a lot of these guys be getting kicked in the sack. It's a little weird for martial arts, but at the same time, it can be pretty funny. So you know what? I'll take it because sometimes that's all I need. And more times than not, that's all I want. I don't want all this other political stuff and your agenda coming in, which already can ruin stuff. But then on top of that, you bring your political agenda and then try to change the very foundation of a fan favorite property that has been around anywhere from 5 to 6 decades at least. We don't need that. We don't want that. It's making me wonder, do we need to continue to include any type of political message, at all in media? I don't think it's ever going to completely disappear. And, when it comes down to it, this is isolated to, again, Disney more than anything. Not everybody's doing this. Maybe if we just focus on Marvel and Star Wars, like those guys need to stop being political, but everyone else can keep doing what they're doing. I don't know, but it's escapism, dude. Have fun. Sprinkle in a little something when you address it here. Give us a scene or two, whether it's race-based, whether it's sex-based, whether it's mental health-based in terms of neurodivergency, whatever the case may be. Just, give people a scene. Maybe give them an episode, but keep it on track to what the character's supposed to be doing and what the goal of the series is actually supposed to be in terms of kicking butt, unaliving people with a glowy stick sword. You know what I'm saying? Apparently lightsabers can actually be like light whips now. I didn't know that. Come on, leave it at that when it really comes down to it. Because as much as people apparently don't care for the majority of the Star Wars movies, the original trilogy, not political. The prequel trilogy, not political. As much as everyone hates the sequel trilogy, it was a little political in terms of how they did things and the way the director did things because of Rey and her just being a prodigy that just got so powerful out of nowhere. But in terms of the actual story, even that wasn't political. Y'all doing all this political stuff, putting in front of our faces, altering the foundation of what we know and have grown up with and therefore love, and then getting mad at us when we make it known we don't like it, it's starting to make me wonder, do we really need to continue having politics and anything related to that, at least in Marvel and overall Disney related media? I'm gonna go ahead and leave it there, guys. I didn't plan on ranting, but it's starting to bug me. And as you see, I'm sure other content creators that you watch and all that stuff, it's bugging a lot of us. It's bugging a lot of us geeks, nerds, dweebs, and all that stuff who grew up with this stuff. We loved it. We played with the toys. We indulged in it. I'm about to be 30 in a couple years, and I still love this stuff. Maybe I'm weird for it, but the fact of the matter is a lot of people do not like this stuff right now. So I'll leave it there. If you have any feedback or comments, whatever, share it with me in the comment section below. I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.